2, 1. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope that y'all are excited and ready for another amazing Power to Fly virtual event. My name is Meg, and I'm part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team. Normally, Mariella gets to lead chats like this, but I'm really excited to get to talk today with Lorraine from Prezi and get to share some of her amazing advice with all of you. So before we get started, I just want to go over real quick housekeeping items in case you haven't joined us for a chat and learn before, or maybe it's been a while. So one thing that we want to highlight for all of you is that participation is incredibly valued and encouraged. So for all of you, please feel free if you would like to turn your cameras on, share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely, messy buns, furry coworkers, non-traditional workspaces, bring it all, y'all. We don't care where you are. We just want to meet you wherever that is. Oops, sorry, y'all. Got to make sure my alerts stay off. My bad. One thing I want to highlight, like I said, is that ability to participate. So if you have questions for our speaker, if you want to dive in deeper on something that we're talking about, or even if you have a question that we haven't touched on yet, please feel free to ask. You can always put your question into the group chat. If you'd like your question asked, but you want to be kept anonymous, that's great. All you have to do is DM your question to me. Now, if you do have any kind of privacy concerns, because we are live streaming and recording today's event, if you have any privacy concerns, just make sure that you stay on mute. If you come off mute, then whatever is up, like if you have your camera on, your display name, your avatar, that's what will show up on the live recording. So if you have privacy concerns, all you have to do is stay on mute. Now, like I said, with participation, y'all have the opportunity to really control the discussion today. Steer us where you want to go. We want to make sure that if you took time out of your day to spend with Power to Fly and amazing people like Lorraine from Prezi, then we want to make sure this is well worth it. So if you have a question and you would like to get an answer today, ask early, ask often. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat to grab questions out of there. And then once we get into the swing of things, we will get started with questions. So let's see here. Okay, so last but not least, today's session is being recorded, like I mentioned. So everybody that registered for today's session is going to get an email in about 1 to 2 business days. So it'll come to you next week with a link to where you can rewatch this recording when it's posted on the Power to Fly website. Now, if you have to bounce after 5 minutes, doesn't matter. You'll still get the recording. Even if, high future viewers, if you forgot that this was happening, if the time didn't work out for you, maybe you just want to watch the recording. This will all, anybody that registered will get this. And let's say that Lorraine says something absolutely amazing today, just like mind blowing. You have to share it right now with a friend or a coworker or a relative, doesn't matter. Within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of the session today, the live stream that that's happening right now on YouTube will be posted to our Power to Fly Chat and Learns channel. So I'll send a link out to y'all in the chat here in just a little bit. But you can always go over there, if you can't wait the 1 to 2 days to connect and rewatch or send the link to whoever you would like. Now, like I said, we do have that Power to Fly Chat and Learn channel. You can also keep up with us on our various social channels. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I definitely recommend you check us out and follow us over there. We've got great content we post and, blog posts, more videos like this, Meet the Recruiter videos, all kinds of stuff. So definitely check those out. Now, I'm really excited to speak with Lorraine again. In case y'all haven't seen one of her previous chat and learns with us, Lorraine Lee is a top-rated virtual keynote speaker and a leader at the intersection of editorial and tech. Now, with more than 300,000 followers on LinkedIn, she is passionate about helping professionals accelerate their careers and build influence in a virtual office. Now, as a speaker, Lorraine has been invited to Fortune 500 companies, tech firms, government orgs, and many more. Now, as the head of editorial at Prezi, Lorraine is also a LinkedIn learning instructor for the popular course Virtual and Hybrid Meeting Essentials. And she has been featured in publications including Inc., Read Write, and Entrepreneur. Prior to Prezi, Lorraine was a news editor at LinkedIn, and we are so happy to have her join us today. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thanks, Meg. I'm so happy to be here with all of you.
Me too. Before we go into what people can expect to get out of the conversation today, do you have anything you'd like to add to that bio for anything people should know about you?
Yeah, I think you covered it all. Sounded great. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. So what you see on your screen in front of you now is going to be some of the main takeaways from today's conversation. Now, we identified these both with conversations with Lorraine prior to today's session, as well as with the questions that you all submitted when you register. Now, these are the areas we're going to try and get to today. But like I said, y'all are more than welcome to drive today's conversation. So if you want to dig in deeper on something, or if you want to make sure that we touch on a topic, make sure that you speak up. You can put your questions, like I said, into that Zoom the Zoom chat pop-up, or you can also DM them to me directly if you would like your question raised, but you want to be kept anonymous. So we're going to talk about what the TEA or T method is, how it can help you land your next exciting opportunity. We're going to discuss some ways to appear more professional, memorable, and confident for your next video interview. And we're going to talk about some ways to create the perfect video setup to stand out on an interview. I'm actually really excited for this, mostly because I'm hoping that a lot of the tips I can utilize for Power to Fly in my hosting job. But I'm really, really excited to hear what you all want to know about this, about video interviewing and ways that you can, kind of do it better, do it easier, do it, more successfully. So Lorraine, let's dive in here. I know that you wanted to talk to us a little bit first and give us, kind of a presentation. So I'm going to yield the stage to you, and I'll hang out back here, and you just let me know when you're ready to start questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meg, and welcome everyone. What's the first thing you all do when you get on a video call? Most of us are going to look at ourselves. We want to make sure that our hair is okay and there's nothing weird going on in the background. Essentially, we want to make sure that we're looking good on camera. Now that many of us are remote, often the only way our colleagues or clients or recruiters see us is on video. So that makes video really, really important. And unfortunately, many people still don't know how to use it to their advantage. So today, you're going to learn the essentials for how to present yourself in the best light to get noticed and make a strong first impression on camera, which will make you look more credible, competent, and confident on camera, and hopefully land you that next job or opportunity. What's your drink of choice in the morning? For many of us, it will be a cup of coffee, or in some cases, tea. Now, the T method covers the first things that you should consider when setting yourself up for a video call. So what is the T method exactly? T stands for tech, energy, and aesthetics, the three critical areas to get right before jumping into any video call. But first, before I dive into the T method, I want to share a little bit about why I'm here talking about this topic. As Meg mentioned in that wonderful introduction, my name is Lorraine Lee, and I'm the head of editorial at Prezi, a virtual presentation and collaboration solution used by the majority of the Fortune 1000 to make meetings better. Before Prezi, I was an editor at LinkedIn for 6 years, where I created and hosted its Female Founders video series, and I was part of the team that launched LinkedIn's first ever video product all the way back in 2016, so I've been around video for quite a few years now. I also launched a LinkedIn learning course late last year called Virtual and Hybrid Meeting Essentials, and I was named a top-rated virtual keynote speaker for my keynotes talking about video and virtual presentations. So this is an area I'm really passionate about, and I'm excited to share my tips with you all today. And I encourage you all to connect with me on LinkedIn, and feel free to take screenshots throughout this presentation, post them on LinkedIn, and tag me. So let's start off with T. Tech is probably one of the more overwhelming aspects of our new virtual world. We have a lot of new things to think about now when getting on a video call. So I want to make the tech part less overwhelming for you. These items are personally what I use, and I've had great success with these, and it doesn't break the bank, which I think is another important consideration. So the first, we have a microphone. You'll also need an external camera. I recommend you get a clicker, and then you'll want to make sure that you have the right software. So we're going to talk about the first two in today's session. So let's dive into our microphones first. Many people are going to forgive bad cameras, but they won't forgive bad audio. I'm sure we've all been on those video calls where every third word the person is saying is kind of choppy and you can't really hear what's going on, and you just want to hang up right there and then. It's really frustrating to listen when you can't fully hear the other person. So I recommend buying an external microphone for a number of reasons. The first is that you'll have better sound quality because the microphones within our laptops are not really the best. Not only that, but you can adjust volume on external mics, and there's other toggles as well to ensure that you're getting the best sound. There's also another really practical use for it. Needing to click unmute and mute, or even holding down the space bar on Zoom calls, for example, to speak, is just another inconvenience to manage. And if you're already overwhelmed with the tech, it's going to be just mental overload that you don't need. So the moment that you decide that you want to say something, there's going to be a lag as you reach for your mouse and then move the clicker over to click unmute. And you want to make the conversation as natural as possible. So what an external microphone does is it makes it really easy to mute and unmute with the click of a physical button. Even though we're virtual, this is going to be an essential piece of hardware that needs to be brought into the experience to make for a better video call that allows for a more free-flowing conversation while also allowing you to mute easily and avoid distracting background sounds. Next, let's talk about our external cameras. External cameras are one of the best investments you can make. Similar to the audio in our laptops, our laptop webcams are really bad. They make us look grainy and dark. Now, I use a Logitech Brio, and when I got it, it's considered one of the best webcams for the price. I instantly felt more confident. I knew I was looking a lot better on camera, it was sharper, crisper, and it picked up the lighting a lot better. I just generally looked a lot more professional. I think we've all been on those calls where someone looks super sharp and they have a crisp camera, and we just think to ourselves, wow, that person looks really good. And that's what we're aiming for here with our camera quality. If you want to spend more money, you can get something like a DSLR camera. They look really, really nice, but they are significantly pricier. And I think you can still achieve a great look with an external webcam to start. So I would recommend starting off there if you don't yet have one. Next, let's move into the E part of the T method. And that would be energy. Your energy consists of many different factors, not just whether you look awake for your call. So energy includes things like your introduction, finding a moment to reset, eye contact, and smiling. And today we're going to talk about your intro, eye contact, and smiling. So let's start off with your intro. People make a first impression of you in as little time as a few milliseconds and in as most as a few seconds. That is really not a lot of time at all. So the first impression is going to be heavily influenced by your energy. So I want to share a few tricks with you that will help. The first is to remember that your mood really matters on camera. Even though we're on video, people can sense if we are feeling agitated, tired, or uncomfortable. And in fact, these feelings are probably even more magnified on video because naturally on video, we come across as more uninterested and disengaged unless we are putting in that extra work because video kind of mutes those expressions that we naturally have. One way to counteract this is to think of a good or funny memory before joining a call. So let's actually, as a group, just take a second to think of one now. Think of something that made you laugh recently. And for those who maybe need a little help thinking of a good memory, I have these amazing images here and GIFs. Now looking at this, thinking about your last memory, did your mood lift? You should have noticed yourself smiling a little bit more. Hopefully you felt a little bit lighter. And it's that kind of energy that we want in your calls and on your face to create a strong first impression. You'll then also want to think about what you're saying when you're introducing yourself on calls. Starting off a call with questions like, how are you? Can you hear me? Can you see my screen? Those are not really going to be the ideal way to start off a call. They're pretty generic, they can be kind of monotonous, and they can make you seem unprepared, and they don't really help you stand out from the rest. How about changing those questions to ones that build rapport right at the start? So you can say something like, wow, it's great to see you. Where are you calling in from? Oh, that's really cool. Have you lived there a long time? Or what's your favorite thing about living there? Or what was the highlight of your weekend? Or what's the one thing that you want to learn about me today that would make you feel confident in moving me forward in the process? And I really like this one as well because you're making it a collaborative meeting right from the start with your interviewer. Now, questions like these break up the monotony of what we usually experience when getting on video calls and awaken the brain out of autopilot. If you can be that person to help guide small talk to interesting conversations, you're going to connect better by learning more about each other and you become more memorable. Lastly, make sure that the language you're using to start off the call is inclusive. Find opportunities to use people's first names and use language like we, our, and us. Humans love hearing their names. It makes us feel a sense of belonging and connected with the other person who's saying it. It also recaptures attention if someone is zoning out and brings focus back into the call. There's also a benefit to using collaborative language. If you can help the hiring manager or interviewer feel like you're already part of the team and you can help them visualize it, they're going to look on you more favorably. So an example of this might be, if I were to join the company and do this role, what would be most helpful to the group and how would I be able to advance our goals? Next, you'll want to make sure that you're making eye contact on these calls. You should always aim to be looking at the camera or right below it. This is hard to do though, I've experienced this as well, because it's human nature to want to look at ourselves to make sure that we look okay, or sometimes we want to see how we look reacting to something, but as best as you can, really fight this urge, and a great way to help with this is to turn off self-view. I see a lot of presentations and video calls where people are looking kind of sideways at their slide or down at the screen, where they see the interviewer. Sometimes they're looking entirely at a separate monitor, and it makes them look like they're distracted or disengaged. Do not be this person. When you do this, it's an instant trigger for the interviewer to also zone out, because if you don't look engaged, why should they be? So as best as you can, again, look right below the camera or at the camera, depending on your setup, so that the person on the other side feels like you're looking at them and it feels a little bit more natural, like you're having an in-person conversation. The next and last tip in the energy section is to smile. When you get ready to make a presentation or get on video to meet someone new, you may experience any one of these super fun emotions as nerves and anxieties build up. Interviews are very nerve-wracking, so if you're feeling this way, totally normal. When I did my first presentations on video, I was personally these first two. Now, if I let those expressions be the main ones in my presentation and I was talking like this the whole time and just very, straight-faced, the audience probably would not have enjoyed it very much. Instead, when we smile, the person or people on the other side of the camera see that we're enjoying ourselves and that we are excited about what we are talking about, and it encourages them to feel the same. Our voices also sound more positive and become lighter. You've heard that a smile is contagious, and it applies to video communications and definitely interviewing as well. A smile is going to lift your mood and the mood of those around you. Now, remembering to smile took me a decent amount of practice when I started presenting and being on video, but once I got more comfortable, it did really make a huge difference in how people connected with me and engaged with my presentations. And I still remember the first one where I actually got a chat where someone had said, "Oh, I really love how much Lorraine is smiling." So it does make an impact. Next, let's move on to the A, aesthetics. Aesthetics are not just about how you look, but also how the world looks around you and how all those things combine to make that strong first impression. Aesthetics is made up of lighting, your environment, your framing, and your clothing. And today we'll focus on environment and framing. Having a well thought out, curated environment is going to give a more professional look and feel to you. And similar to lighting, if you look more professional, you're going to be more confident with how you're coming off. Now, before I moved into this apartment here, my bed was literally right behind my desk. I always felt very self-conscious wondering on video calls if people were paying attention to me, were they looking at the background behind me? And spacing issues like these, they can't always be helped, but if you're in a similar situation, I would recommend buying some sort of room divider, or I even had a coworker who hung up a curtain behind him, which I thought was a very creative solution. So there are hacks like these that can at least give the illusion of a proper workspace and make you feel more confident about how you're appearing on camera. And the other side will view you as more professional as well. So my recommendation to start, for those of you who are getting started, is that simpler is better. So when you are starting off, a clean background like Jessica is using here usually works best so that you and any content you're sharing don't get lost, and again, so people don't get distracted by what's going on behind you. But once you get more comfortable with your background, you can start getting creative with it, and that's where the fun comes in. So for any NPR fans in the audience, you might recognize Guy Raz here. You can see he chose an outdoor setting for his video, and it looks really wonderful. Or I love this example by Ted. She had only 2 plants behind her, but she had all of this natural light and the colors of the plants really popped against the white. So it's still one of my favorite setups. I think it was so beautiful, and she also looked professional but also approachable, which I think is the vibe that most of us will probably want to give off on our video interviews. Now, what you may not know is when I've talked about this topic before, I actually called this section curating your background. But I think with all of the advances that we're seeing in tech and how people are up-leveling their video calls, curating your environment is a more accurate description of what someone needs to do to really stand out and impress. And if you can do this, you're going to be definitely way ahead of your counterparts who are also interviewing. So at Prezi, we're seeing a lot of companies and customers creating a true virtual experience on their video that contributes to their overall presence and professionalism. So here's an example showing how you can have both a great background and your video foreground becomes even more impressive once you add a simple name tag and visual element. So if I were to recommend, if anyone wants to try this and you're in an interview, use the company's logo, use their colors, make it feel like you're already immersed in the company. And also it's just an extra nice touch that's going to make you stand out. So doing something like this, both the foreground and the background, that's an example of truly curating the whole virtual and physical environment on camera to create the strongest impression possible. So this is extremely valuable real estate, and we need to ensure that we are making the most of it to be noticed. We need to find ways to stand out and break free from the status quo, from the typical video calls we're all on. And I promise you, when you can curate the environment, that's going to be a surefire way to do that. Next, let's talk about framing. So this is what I often see when people are on video calls. So with this angle, I can kind of sometimes see up people's noses. I get to see underneath their chin. It's great to see your face. Definitely have your video on. But if this is your situation, this is going to be a bit too close and frankly can be uncomfortable to the other side. And there's actually a scientific reason for this. So people skills expert Vanessa Van Edwards says that this is because this feeling of being too close on camera replicates what we might feel in person when someone gets in our personal space. Our brain's reaction is to think that this person could potentially harm us, and it activates our amygdala, which processes fear. And fear is not a feeling that we want to be giving to our interviewer or our hiring manager. Being this close is also an issue because it makes it harder for the other side to stay engaged when they're talking to just a floating head with no movement or space to give their eyes a break. You see, before I was using my hands a lot. With this positioning here, you can't see that. So really all you can look at is my face. Your video should ideally show your shoulders and a little bit of your torso with a little bit of space above the top of your head. So when you can position your framing a little bit more like this, you're no longer just going to be a floating head, and the person on the other side of the video is going to feel more like you're having an in-person conversation with them when they can see your body movement and hand gestures. So they're seeing a little bit more of you here as well, which only strengthens your video presence. So let's do a quick group activity now to check whether we have the right distance from the camera. So everyone, if you wouldn't mind sticking out your arm, you'll want about an arm's length of distance between you and the camera. So if you have, much less than an arm's length of distance, you're likely too close to the camera. So make whatever adjustments you need so that, again, you want to show the top of your torso, you have a little bit space above your head, and enough here to show your hands and body language. Now you can use a laptop stand, you can use books, leftover delivery boxes, whatever you find around your house to prop up your camera and put it at the right distance and height. So it really doesn't have to be anything fancy, just grab whatever you have around the house. So that was the last part of the T method. Let's do a quick recap. For your tech, we talked about making sure you're equipped with a microphone and a webcam. For energy, you'll want to focus on your intro, eye contact, and smiling. And for aesthetics, you'll want to make sure that you've curated your environment and that you have proper camera framing. Again, these are what I consider the essential basics. There's, of course, a lot more that we can all do, but it does start getting overwhelming if we try to do everything once. So, I recommend starting off with these, and I'm sure even with just these simple steps, you're going to already notice a really big impact. And with that, I know you all sent in some really great questions, so I'll pass it back over to Meg for Q&A.
I absolutely love those. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Those were some really great, really great advice. And honestly, now you have me kind of rethinking a lot of my virtual space too. So thank you so much for prompting that. All right, so Lorraine went over a ton of stuff that relates to a lot of the questions that y'all asked in the chat or sorry, when you registered. However, if you want more details on any of this, please feel free to let us know. I'm going to go through some of the questions that we weren't able to get to just yet. And then if you've got questions on, some of the stuff that Lorraine covered in her presentation, you can ask questions on that whenever. So please feel free to do so. All right, so let's talk a little bit more kind of about aesthetics, especially when it comes to like your background. We had talked a little bit about, what kind of looks professional. There's all these different options. I've got friends that have like a green screen that like clips to the back of their office chair that allows them to do a virtual backdrop. I've got friends that do a whole bunch of different stuff. If virtual is not really available to you, what are some of the options, like, am I an example of what not to do? Or should you have some personality in your space, or is it better to be a little bit more plain?
Yeah, actually, I really like your background, Meg. I think it depends what kind of vibe you're trying to give off. So, Meg, I feel like looking at your background is like very fun. You look creative, so I like it. And as you get more like advanced, so to speak, like you can put things in the background that are conversation starters. So I really like what you have. You have some artwork and some like I think it's like a Lilo and Stitch bobblehead there, and so a
Yeah.
lot of things that I could call out if we were getting on a call. So yes, I think decorating, and that's part of the curating. Like you can see, I have some photos here. So sometimes people ask me on calls, like, "Oh, did you take those photos? What are those photos of?" I have some plans that are hidden behind the content right now, but different things that people can touch on. So I definitely think yes, curating your environment is ideal. I actually think, unless you have a green screen, try to avoid virtual backgrounds just because our brains are already working overtime on video to try to read people's facial gestures and our facial expressions and facial gestures and trying to just interpret, what the vibe is and what someone is trying to convey. And if you have a virtual background without the green screen, it's just not going to be as crisp. So, you've all seen those virtual backgrounds where someone's like half their face disappears and like their arm, their hand appears detached from their arm, just like a bunch of crazy things going on. So your brain, that's just making them work overtime again to be like, okay, I'm looking at them on video, but I'm also trying to like put the pieces together of like what is reality. So
Yeah,
I try to just say like use the physical environment if you can.
like that. And I can think of a ton of times where, I've either had like a ponytail in or something, and like I get up looking sort of bald because it
Yeah,
cuts off your bun or cuts off whatever.
that's the one.
It sounds roughly similar. I'm probably dating myself with this, but there was a Tide commercial, I don't know, a couple years back
Yeah.
that was people with stains on their shirts, and the stains would like sing or talk or like somehow distract, usually in like a conversation or an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of reminds me of that, right? It's another thing that's catching your interviewer's attention, and it's pulling them away from listening to your answer or like really connecting with you as a person.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that would be something similar. Yeah.
yeah, okay. All right, so let's talk about you talked about kind of monitoring people's expressions, their gestures, how engaged in the in the interview or in the session that they are. If you are one of these people that maybe doesn't talk people's ears off for on the daily, how can you try and keep up that virtual conversation flowing without distracting either other participants or distracting away from maybe the point of what you are all trying to meet about or to be interviewed?
So I would say if you're not a super chatty person and kind of doing this small talk or engaging can be difficult, um, I would recommend just asking a lot of questions. I think anytime you can ask someone a question about themselves or ask them to reflect on something, that's going to get the other person engaged in talking. So it creates that nice balance there. So I would recommend, yeah, just always being curious, always just wanting to learn more about the person on the other side. And I think that will help a lot.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about this strictly within an interview setting as opposed to like meetings or something like that. What do you think interviewers are looking for most when it comes to presenting that professional image and setting that kind of first impression with that interviewer?
Yeah, so I if I had to guess, I would think that recruiters or interviewers are not necessarily looking like at a list, like, oh, does she have the right framing or, eye contact or things like that. But these are things when done well, you or done poorly, you will notice. So all those things I recommended before about the framing, the eye contact. I didn't touch on this in this session today, but like good lighting, all of those are really critical to just looking good on camera. And as I said before, that's your impression. That's what you have, just this frame here, and that's how they're going to interpret, how credible you are, how confident you seem, how put together you look. So getting all those factors in place and getting your setup correct, I think, is really key to coming across in a positive light in your interviews.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think a lot of us have either seen, whether it's video from somebody else that's joined a meeting, or the example that comes foremost to my mind are people that maybe aren't used to like either taking a selfie or like trying to present themselves. You
Yeah.
end up getting like either like kind of thumb face because it's down here, or you're backlit like a Bond villain.
Ah, exactly.
Yeah, like I think like, like you said, we didn't really touch on lighting, but and not to drag us off subject, but yeah, it's stuff like that kind of gives that initial impression of like maybe this person isn't quite like up to date, or
Mhm.
maybe doesn't have as much experience as somebody else
Yeah.
might. Is that something to be concerned about?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I think again, like the virtual space is where we're making our first impression. And so if you want to have an advantage or you want to be at least, in line with we've had, 2+ years of this now, there's going to be a lot of people who have figured out. There are still a lot of people who have not figured it out. But you want to be obviously in the other group who does have it figured out and actually not only has it figured out, but can kind of accelerate and put yourself above the rest of the crowd with some of those tips I shared earlier. Like, for example, eye contact. Like a lot of people are still not doing eye contact on calls, but when you can do that, it makes a really big difference. And your recruiter, your interviewer will notice these things.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, granted, I moved the post-it around, but I have a giant, really bright, really huge post-it that I moved from either my phone
Yeah,
to my laptop to try and, keep driving my eye back to the camera as opposed to,
yeah.
to the video, or to, to my own video. Um,
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I think, yeah, like adding pictures of people or the person you're talking to, putting a picture maybe like even behind the camera, just to keep your eye line in the right position. I think those are all great ideas.
yeah, awesome. Okay, so we did have a question that we talked about a little bit, but I think it's a good idea to go back into, because this is something both you and I have done a lot during this conversation, is talk with our hands. Would you consider that to be a distraction, or something that makes you, not necessarily makes you memorable, but like, is it worth the potential for distraction if that's something that makes your speech more dynamic?
Yes, I remember this question. Definitely use your hand gestures. And I have a separate 5-step attention framework, which is actually where I talk about using hand gestures a little bit more. But I think you should be using hand gestures. Obviously, you know, it's not like craziness, but I think using hand gestures to emphasize points that you're saying, to better support what you're saying, is only going to benefit you. And the interesting thing about hand gestures is when we show our hands on camera and show our palms a little bit, we actually come across as warmer and more energetic, and people actually like us more. So yes, definitely tons of benefits to using hand gestures. I know for some people they can feel a little bit uncomfortable, so I actually like starting off with very simple ones. So in the simplest form, just wave at the start of and end of your meeting. You may have noticed me. I kind of counted a few things off during the call. If you're talking about something small, use a pinch gesture. Something big, widen your hand. So there are simple ways that you can get started if you're feeling a little bit nervous or unsure about how to incorporate those into your video call. But I would definitely recommend using them.
I like it. Now, how do, in your opinion, and especially for people who maybe like don't really see the distinction between, but what is the difference in, in terms of like perception from the other person in, using hand gestures to really like emphasize what you're talking about, versus something I am horribly guilty of, which is playing with your hair, or I tend to like flip it, or I'll touch the ends, and it's like one of those things that I don't really notice, but like if I keep my own, if I keep my own video on, I can see myself doing it and I'm far more likely to stop.
Yeah.
What's the difference between those? One is more of that emphasis, but do you think that that there's a big difference between them, or a big difference on the impact?
Yeah, I do. So I think the ones that you're talking about, like playing with your hair, maybe like playing with a pen or like rubber bands or something like that, those are because probably the person is a little bit nervous. And especially like hair twirling or even like crossing arms or things like that, that's probably because you're nervous and it's a way to kind of comfort yourself. So I think if you can, when you're practicing interviewing, definitely record yourself, practice with a live other person, a friend or a family member, and see what kind of presentation tics, video tics come up for you. But I think that's great, Meg, that you observe this, that you're trying to, change it. So there are a difference between hand gestures that emphasize your point and hand gestures that are like from nerves.
Distracting, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I have like 3 or 4 different fidget toys on my desk. So
Mhm.
that way I can put something in my hand, put my hands in my lap, and not like, at least not have them free to be touching my hair when it's
Sure,
down
yeah,
or
that's a good
whatever. Yeah.
solution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have questions on any of the things that we're talking about so far, please feel free to jump in and ask. You can put them in the chat, you can DM them to me. We only have about 25 minutes left in today's chat, so don't let the opportunity to connect with Lorraine pass you by. All right, so the next question I have is something that I honestly struggle with a lot, and I'm in, far less of a fraught situation than like an interview. I get to interview people in a more conversational context.
Mhm.
Now, this person had asked, how can I communicate my enthusiasm for the job to the interviewer through a screen in order to persuade them that I am the best candidate? I struggle with this with, new groups, because I get to work with new people all of the time. Let's address this from an interview perspective. What can you do to communicate that energy? What do you go for from that point first?
Yeah, so I think what I mentioned before, smiling is don't underestimate the impact of smile. I think one thing we have to remember when we are on video calls and for interviews is that we have to be more extra than we think we need to be because video does mute things. It's not the same as in person. So we really have to, as energetic as you think you are, try to take it up another notch because it's probably not coming across exactly in the way you think it is to the interviewer. So I would say, amping up your energy, smiling is really important. Another thing I would say is the use of power words. So power words are words that can have a psychological effect on us, either positively or negatively. So obviously we want to use positive power words. So in the case of an interview, I'm so excited to meet with you today, to chat with you. What would be the ideal things that you want me to cover today? So incorporating power words, so in that case, it would be probably wonderful, maybe ideal is a power word. Just breaking out of the norm of what you might normally say on a call, I think is going to, again, like wake the person up out of autopilot and also make you stand out and then also make you look really engaged and enthusiastic. So it's your combination of your words, your body language, all of those things combined.
Okay. How is there a best way, in your opinion, to handle it if you're following these guidelines that you've set out, and you're trying to bring that energy, but it is just not being either reciprocated or fed into? It is really easy, even with people on the screen, to feel like you're speaking with. It is really easy to sort of get that feeling of like crickets, and like maybe your joke didn't land, or maybe
Yeah.
they are much more serious about this situation than you thought. How do you recommend handling that? Is that something that you should be taking your guideline from the interviewer, or do you want to lead with that energy and try and keep it up even if it's not being reciprocated?
I would try to lead with that energy. There's a chance that your recruiter doesn't know video best practices. And, a recruiter is the face of the company, I would imagine, and hope that they're enthusiastic as well, but they might not know that they're coming across a certain way. So keep up your energy. Hopefully it becomes contagious and they kind of exude a little bit more as well. But I think this is where you have the chance to really lead that conversation and to lead the energy of the call and to make an impression.
Okay. Last, question that's a little bit selfish because I'm curious about this.
Yeah.
When we talk about things like kind of amping up your, your personality a little bit or your excitement about things, when it comes to those kind of situations for makeup wearing individuals, do you kind of go by the stage makeup mentality of it needs to be visible from X amount of feet? Is this something that needs to be played with? What is your take on something like makeup that's maybe not such a concern for, you know, most of the dudes generally, people that don't have to deal with this? What do you recommend?
So the question is around like how much makeup.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um, I would do what feels natural. I wouldn't say you have to go like full stage makeup because you're on video. I have a little bit of makeup on right now, but it's not too much. I think it's enough. Again, with good lighting, you'd be surprised how little makeup you might need, or just how good you can look on camera with good lighting. So definitely have that. But in terms of makeup, I wouldn't say there's anything particularly different you need to do. You might want to consider. I use a what do you call it? Or bronzer, just some sort of camera makeup cover up where
Yeah.
you put it on certain parts of your face to avoid shine from lights
Yeah.
on camera. So that's something that you might consider. And then lipstick, colorful lipstick will also help you stand out a little bit more, and I think leave a more positive impression when you can have brighter lips.
Yeah, I love that. I'm usually, especially out in, pre-pandemic, I was very much a lipstick person.
Yeah.
Quickly found that it was drying my lips out like crazy, and then
Nice.
discovered the studio effects thing within Zoom, and that, like,
Yeah.
y'all, it's it's game changing. It's really cool. So
Yeah, yeah, that is a good feature.
yeah, I love that. Okay, so if we're talking about kind of going back into this virtual interview, I know a lot of people really like to use notes. I mean, I have notes on what our questions are. I refer to them constantly, but I'm also not in an interview setting. Do you think it's acceptable to use notes for a virtual interview?
Yes. And I think that's one of the amazing benefits that comes with virtual. So definitely, if you need notes, take advantage of it. I think the one thing I would caution about notes is to not rely on a script too much. They should be there to kind of help trigger ideas or remind you of something, but don't kind of get glued to the idea of reading through any sort of script or notes, because if something goes off course a little bit, it's going to throw you off, and it'll be hard to kind of get back into it. But yeah, I think as much as you can, like put the notes underneath the camera so you're making the eye contact. But yeah, I use notes all the time, so I would definitely say go for it.
Excellent. Yeah. I love the idea of not only, is this something that you should call out? Like, should you say like, yeah, I've got some notes ready just in case, but like, let's talk, blah, blah, blah. Like, should you make it a point to share that with your interviewer? Or is it one of those things that's kind of best kept close to the vest and not draw attention to it?
I think it depends at what stage in the interview you're at. So I talked to someone recently. She was in the final stages of an interview. And so she did come on the call with notes and with a plan. And she said, I would like to cover a few things today. This is what I have covered. And she had a Prezi video, but also some notes on the screen. Also, is there anything else that you would want to make sure that I cover? And so I think notes are fine to acknowledge, and it shows that you've prepared and that you are able to take control of the conversation. And this is really about you to sell yourself, right? And to sell, all the great work that you've done and all the amazing things that you can do for this company. So I think as much as you can guide the conversation, that's great.
Okay, cool. Now, I know we had a question in the chat here that somebody sent on DM, and they had questions regarding wardrobe. Now, we talked a little bit about this in your presentation, but how should you be dressing in terms of an interview? Let's start with there. Like, what would you recommend if that people need to think about in terms of video interviews that they might not really think of if they were just going to an in-person?
So definitely, of course, whatever you're wearing on top has to look nice. If you want to wear sweatpants on the bottom because that makes you comfortable, I think that's
Oh,
totally
heck
fine.
yes.
Yeah.
My husband calls
I
it
have,
going full newscaster. It's the best.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But what I would say is if you're unsure about what the dress code is, you can ask the recruiter, but I would err on the side of just being a little bit more formal and overdressed. Just, makes you look more professional and put together, better than to be underdressed. I would say definitely aim for jewel colors, jewel tone colors. Those will help you stand out and they just pop better on camera. Avoid stripes or any sort of strange patterns. Your stripes look okay actually, but like sometimes when it's very close together, the
Oh
stripes
yeah.
start moving on
Oh
camera. It's like
yeah.
a weird phenomenon. So avoid kind of those close knit patterns. And then also be aware of what your background is. So I have this white wall here, so I'm not going to wear just a white shirt. If I wear a white shirt, I'm going to put like a colored blazer over it to make it pop against the background. You don't want to blend into your background. So I would say those are the key things to think about as you're considering your wardrobe for your next interview.
I love that. I don't know if it helps anybody else or if anybody else does this. I do this with my makeup and with my wardrobe. If it's something I haven't worn, for a chat previously, I'll do my makeup in the bathroom or wherever I've got, the lighting. I'll put my outfit on and then I'll come like turn on my camera to like just double check.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's like, oh yeah, you can't see that blush at all. So like let's
Yes.
increase that a little bit. How much should people think about that? Think about things like, how it looks on camera, how it might look to the interviewer. Other people might have completely different settings on their computers, on their monitors. Is that something that you should worry about, or is that just kind of not worth the time?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about the settings on the other person's monitor, but I think that's great, Meg, that you kind of do a test run and look at yourself ahead of time. I think everyone should do that. I recently bought a shirt and I thought it was okay for videos, and then I wore it and then I had the weird pattern movement and I was like, oh, okay, I guess I shouldn't be wearing this for my future video call. So yeah, you have to test it out just to double check and be extra sure it all looks okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I know we've only got about 10 minutes left. We had some more questions from the audience when y'all registered. So we're going to keep going through those. But if you have a question, please feel free. Now we had somebody that wanted to know about the most common failures when it comes to video setup. Now you touched on, kind of some of the high points that people should know when they're doing that setup. But is there anything that you've seen that was sort of like a little out of left field, like kind of like not really the most common, but
Yeah.
like, oh wow, yeah, definitely we should watch out for this as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I've seen anything too out of left field. I would say, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think probably the biggest mistake I see is having the window behind you. While the
Okay.
window behind you does light up the room, it makes you look dark and then it's hard to see you. So I would say that's probably the most common mistake. And then again, like being too close to the camera and not letting there be space for you to breathe and for the interviewer to see more than just your face. But I'm trying to have you seen anything that's been very strange before, Meg?
Um, yeah, I've seen everything from like somebody that had they had an external camera, which was great, but like there was a plant that kept like getting blown too close. And so
Huh?
like the camera would like not really understand what was going on, the focus would change,
Yeah.
and you could tell the person was like you could tell they didn't have their video pulled up so they couldn't see
Yes.
themselves.
Uh-huh.
And so it was one of those things where it was like I didn't want to call attention to it, but like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you going to do? Like, you
Yeah.
can either call them out and potentially make it awkward, or just kind of let it go and hope that, it's one of those things that people are willing to let slide in the age of, COVID quarantine, working from home in what might not be an ideal situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, yeah, I think there's been stuff like that. We've also had like people with like jewelry that made
Oh,
noises that they didn't realize. That was an interesting one. We had somebody's earrings that were really setting off the audio and could like
interesting.
did not figure it out until 20 minutes into the talk. So yeah.
That reminds me, there is something that I used to do is when I wore headphones, the mic would brush against my shirt and make a distracting sound. So that's just, if any of you are using headphones, just something to be aware of.
Oh, that's a good call out. I hadn't thought about that. Okay, so let's see. Failures, blah, blah, blah. Let's go through that one. I'm trying to make sure I didn't miss any of these questions that we wanted to go into. Relevant to keeping my aesthetics. Let's see. All right. Okay, so let's dig back into let's talk a little bit about kind of standing out and wanting to stand out from the crowd. How far is too far? You want to stand out, you want to set yourself apart, but you also want to kind of fit into that like professional categorization. How do you know kind of how to toe that line?
I would put yourself in the interviewer's shoes and and think about whatever it is, whatever creative thing that you're trying to do, and think to yourself, does the person still come across as professional? Is this like a reasonable thing to do? Or if I were to receive this, would I think like, oh, this is so strange, what are they doing? Um, and there's I think sticking to something that's professional, I think is the safe way to go. I mean, it's good to be creative. Like you can see here with my video, I'm getting creative with the visuals. I have some for example, this was like one of the questions, like you can add like fun gifs and things like that to make it a little bit more fun. Um,
I love
but,
that.
but keep it I love Schitt's Creek, but keep it it's still professional, right? So with a
Yeah,
little bit of personality in there. So
yeah, definitely safe for work. I like that.
yeah.
Oh man. Okay. So when we're talking about you had mentioned some of the like the trendier tools, we've talked about stuff from like the video settings, that kind of thing. When you're looking into those trends, do you think that it's something that's okay? Like how can you evaluate like when the next tool comes out if this is something that's really meant more for like fun video calls versus professional video calls? Should you wait until you see someone else use it, or is there a way that maybe like a waiting period, like something comes out and you give it a couple months? How do you recommend people handle that when there's new stuff coming out, new tech and new gadgets and stuff that you can use with video tech?
Yeah, I would say no need to wait. You can just experiment. I mean, like I showed before, like Prezi Video, for example, there is a really you can make it really professional or you can make it really fun. I'm sure a lot of the tools out there, I think, allow you to kind of customize and same with like a PowerPoint slide, for example, or like a Google slide. You can make it as fun or as professional as you want. So I think it's great if you're experimenting and trying new tools. I think that's going to be a definite way for you to stand out and to keep up with the times. Things are changing. A lot of new technology is coming out to support us in our virtual working environments.
Yeah. Okay, something that I struggle with a lot, you may or may not have a fix for this, but I get problems with glasses glare. Now, I've tried a couple different things to like dimming my screen, that kind of thing. Do you have any guidelines for those of us that just truly cannot do contacts, but like cannot make it through a 10-minute call without our glasses? Do you
Yeah,
have any tips for this?
that's such a good question. Yeah, I get asked that a lot. So, you're doing a great job already dimming the monitor. That would be one thing I would suggest. If you have ring lights, or any sort of light, I would recommend moving them a little bit higher so it's not like this, but just like higher up so that it's not hitting your glasses directly. I don't know if you have ring lights, Meg, but those are going to be
Actually,
what
I do, and that's why I stopped
show up
using
the
them.
most
'Cause-
in glasses. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I have
I didn't think about that. Okay, so put them
yeah.
up higher. I can do that.
A little bit higher. You might want to angle your monitor a little bit, depending on where the glare is coming from. And then I would actually recommend I have a light box or a soft box. It's those big lights that you
Yeah.
see in like photo shoots. So I think those are a little bit better than ring lights. They're actually have stronger light and they have a diffuser, so it's a little bit just smoother with the light coming to you.
Yeah, and actually, so my mother-in-law is into photography, and like has equipment like that. And when we were setting her up, I remember checking out some like DIY like stuff
Ah,
specifically for photographers about how to like fake a light box if you don't have one and fake this. And so yeah, that's like I mean I remember helping her to try and stretch fabric over a broken umbrella that we had like
oh
opened
yeah,
up
that's cool. Yeah.
place because it wasn't going to move.
Huh.
But yeah, now I'm thinking I should ask her if she's still using
Yeah,
that.
you should. I'm sure she has something that you can borrow or maybe an older one that you can take.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we only have 6 minutes left in today's chat. These always go way, way, way too quickly. But one of the things that I like to ask, especially towards the end, is is there something about this subject that you really wish people would ask, but they never seem to touch on? Something that is something that you feel is important for people to know, or something useful, but nobody ever really asks the question about it for you to be able to share?
Hmm. No specific questions come to mind, but I will say that the way you appear on video and just the energy you exude, the introduction you give, that's, I think, under undervalued or underestimated the impact that it can
Yeah.
have. And we are all so used to being on video. We are all kind of used to the status quo of how video has been done. And I would just encourage you all to really just experiment, break free out of it, try some of the techniques I shared today. Again, just take it step by step. I know it can seem like a lot, um, but I'm super impressed for anyone who registered and who's attending and just taking that time to learn and to understand this new medium, or not so new medium anymore, but just how to break free from the status quo. I think that's just something that I would encourage everyone to keep in mind as they move forward with their video interviews.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, we did get one question in the chat, so I do want to try and get to this before we bounce today. This person had asked, like, what do you do if everything goes wrong? So obviously, if everything goes wrong,
Mhm.
that's a lot of things.
Yes.
So let's maybe take it kind of piecemeal. One of the ones that I've run into is like a tech issue,
Yep.
completely unforeseeable or unfixable on your end. The one that I ran into was somebody that had a delay on their audio. So you get to the point where you're kind of talking over each other, you're not quite sure how to wait. How do you recommend handling something like that in the moment, especially if you're in an interview and really trying to make a good impression?
Mhm. I would recommend getting off video at that point, because it's just going to be more distracting than it is helpful. And just suggest getting on a phone call. But when you're on that phone call, still make sure that you're smiling, stand up so that that energy is coming through. And then I think after the fact, send a recorded video and maybe go over some points maybe you didn't get to. If you had something that you wanted to show on video, just record it and send it after the fact. So again, they can still see your face and feel a little bit more connected to you. And then ideally, hopefully you can have an Ethernet cord or a hardwired option as well in your home, because I think usually the lag can kind of be related to poor Wi-Fi. So always try
Okay.
to have a hardwired connection if you can.
All right. All right, last question.
Mhm.
In this digital age, right? And we're doing video interviews. Sometimes you might be recording it and then sending it out versus like getting on a one-on-one call with the interviewer. In the age of the dinosaurs, where I am from, when you went to an interview, you were supposed to follow up with a handwritten thank you note that you put in the mail and sent to your interviewer.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we've since shifted into email thank yous. Do you think it's worthwhile to consider doing something like a video thank you to attach to that email that you're sending? Or do you think that's maybe a bit too much, not something people should trouble themselves about?
Definitely include a video afterwards. That's going to make you stand out. And I remember I was on an interview panel for a new hire at Prezi, and she sent a video, and she used Prezi video, and she had the logo and the colors, and I was super impressed. So it will make you stand out if you can do something more special like that. And a lot of people are moving around and changing jobs, so there's a lot of opportunity out there, but there still is a lot of competition because everyone is doing the same
Yeah.
thing. So anything you can do like that to differentiate yourself will be wonderful.
Awesome. Well, Lorraine, this has been like wonderful. I've had a really great time sitting in and talking with you and learning some great tips. I've already looked up the webcam that you mentioned because
Yeah,
I've been hemming and hawing about an upgrade for a while, but this is my sign. I need to do it.
yeah.
But we're so happy to have had you today. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise. This has just been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you everyone for showing up, and Meg for moderating this. It's always an amazing time with Power to Fly. So I was really happy that I could be here today.
Oh, thank you. Huge thank you goes out to our attendees as well. I echo what Lorraine said. You guys came prepared with some great questions. There were amazing questions submitted prior to today, but I really appreciate the questions that y'all sent in and DM'd to me. In case you're new to Power to Fly or this is your first event with us, thank you so much. We hope that we'll see you back again for many more of our virtual events. If you are a returning flyer or frequent flyer with us, thank you so much for attending today, and we can't wait to see you again. I hope y'all have a wonderful Thursday. The weekend comes quickly and that everybody is happy, safe, healthy, just having a good time and hopefully enjoying maybe the first bit of some spring weather around you. That'll be it for us today, but so happy to have spent this time with you. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.